So one of the most asked questions that I receive basically on a daily basis are what are the best watches or the best watch under $1,000? Looking at the best watch under $1,000, it's impossible to name just one. If I had to, I'd name a list, but even with that list, two watches that would absolutely be on it and maybe near the top of it would be the two watches that are going to be going head to head today in a video, the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph versus the Seiko Alpinist SPB121. So these are two of the most complete watches under $1,000, more in this field adventure genre, but we're gonna be putting them head to head, going category by category of specification and picking out what is the winner in each one of those categories. Each win within a category will come with 1 point. We'll tally the points at the end and then determine a winner. Also, a tie will give both of the watches a point. This is not intended to be a full in-depth review of these watches, more head to head on many of the aspects about these watches that I think someone might consider, and I know many people that are looking in this category and price might be looking at both of these watches when trying to make a final decision. As a quick introduction to these watches, starting with the Alpinist, the name Alpinist first appeared in the Seiko lineup in the mid 20th century with the Seiko Laurel Alpinist models, watches developed and used by Japanese explorers during the period. That said, the watch that was responsible for establishing the formula of the SPB121 was the 2006 release of the SARB 017. This JDM model became an enthusiast favorite with its unorthodox green dial, 2 crowns, and internal compass bezel. Despite its 200 meters of water resistance and phenomenal lume, it did have some dressy characteristics that made it versatile, including the cathedral-style hands. The discontinuation of the SARB 017 in 2018 created clamoring among the watch collecting public that hoped to see it one day return. That waiting would only last for a short period of time until 2020, when the SPB121 was released, delivering a new caliber, some subtle changes and updates with its Cyclops, yet sustaining much of the rest of the formula that made these watches a cult favorite. On the other side, you have the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph, a watch that takes from rich history of field watch design of the brand, yet can draw its primary roots from its design being a prop watch from the Christopher Nolan film Interstellar in 2014. The prop watch, apart from looking the part, played a crucial role in the plot of the film, adding so much to its legend that Hamilton decided to release a standard production example in 2019. The watch was an immediate hit, with the only drawback being that it completely mirrored the watch seen in the film, including the not so insignificant diameter of 42 millimeters, which wore every millimeter of that size. As there were many requests for a smaller version, Hamilton officially launched the Murph 38 in the tail end of 2022, giving even more enthusiasts a chance to wear one of the definitive choices for an everyday watch under $1,000. And again, I am not gonna be going through a complete in-depth review and talking about every little detail like lug width and things of that sort, but if you do want a personal account of the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph, I will link to an amazing article by Danny Milton, a member of our team who has owned this watch for quite some time, a lover of the Murph and a huge movie fan, and he really goes into a lot of detail in his recent write-up about the watch, about what really he loves and some of the things that were the draws for him and what has he learned over the last year and a half owning the piece. I'll link to that right at the top in the description. So now we have several categories to go through here, and the first category is going to be wearability. And what I mean by wearability is how viable is the watch for a variety of wrists. Now, we have a 38 millimeter and a 42 millimeter. I'm gonna be looking mostly at the 38 millimeter Murph, given that that is probably a more fair representation of what should go head to head with the Alpinist. So that's what we're gonna be mostly focusing on. So wearability is going to be talking more about how does that watch at that case size wear compared to the Alpinist. And with that, I would say that for the wearability aspect, I would give a slight edge to the Hamilton Murph because of what the Alpinist does with it being more unorthodox. You have a dual crown design with the Alpinist, you have an unorthodox look across the board, more of a bulbous case structure. Looking at some of the dimensions on these watches, looking at the 38 versus the SPB121. So the SPB121 has a diameter of 39.5 millimeters, which I would say wears slightly smaller, but pretty true to size, all things considered. It has a 13.2 millimeter thickness and a 46.4 millimeter lug to lug. Then on the flip side, for the Hamilton, you have a 38 millimeter diameter, an 11.1 millimeter thickness, and a 44.7 millimeter lug to lug. Yes, you do have the 42 millimeter option, but the point of separation between those two probably still leaves some out there that are not going to have the perfect size for them. But I would say that the 38 millimeter wears more like a traditional watch. And if that's something that you're going for, I would say what most people are probably going for, that probably is the safer choice for giving the point here for wearability. Also factoring in that 2 millimeters thinner, I'd say most people prefer a thinner watch compared to a thick watch, and having 2 millimeters thinner on the Murph compared to the Alpinist probably is a big win as well. So wearability, I'm gonna give the edge to the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph. The next category is versatility. So how is this different? This is how viable a watch is to be worn in a variety of different situations. And for that, I'm going to give the edge to the Hamilton Murph again. I think the viability of a black dial versus a green dial is going to give you a lot more runway to be able to wear this in a variety of different situations. Cathedral hands on both of these watches, strangely, but the cathedral hands on the Alpinist compared to the subdued tone of the Hamilton Murph probably also helps in this category. I would also probably argue that this is the most versatile Hamilton Khaki Field model with the Murph because of the cathedral hands, how it wears on the wrist. It doesn't have all the same DNA as some other field watches. It's not as to form of the military design, but in turn probably can be dressed up a little bit easier. The Alpinist's quirkiness probably detracts from the viability in certain situations. Green versus black, gold tone slightly more brazen, compass bezel with 2 crowns, and the Cyclops being more unconventional. Could you wear the Alpinist with a suit? Perhaps, maybe sometimes. But I think the Murph definitely gets an edge here compared to the Alpinist when it comes to its viability in a variety of different situations. Now we move into strap and bracelet. I'm gonna say both of these are a tie. You could argue that the Hamilton is definitely a little bit of a better strap, but these are watches that I don't think you're buying them for the factory strap, and they're both not great. I would say the Alpinist is slightly behind in its factory strap that you're getting, at least for the leather quality, but you are getting a deployant, which is nice to have in your arsenal if you are gonna switch out different straps in the future. Both of them are going to be alligator grain calf straps, so black reptilian on the Murph, and then you have the brown reptilian on the SPB121. The leather quality probably goes to Hamilton. The quality of the clasp, a pin buckle versus a deployant. I think a deployant feels a bit more premium. It's more complex to pull off. I'll give that edge to Seiko. So this is basically a toss-up. I'm gonna give them both a point. It's a tie here. Now when it comes to Lume, this is one of the main weak points for the Hamilton, especially in comparison to the Seiko. So Seiko is going to win by a country mile. I would call the Hamilton Lume adequate or slightly below average for a field watch. The faux age Lume probably impacts the end result too, and the Lume plots around the dial in the SPB121 are not substantial in their size by any means, but they shine exceptionally well along with the cathedral hands at the center. Seiko has some of the best Lume in the business, absolutely destroys here, so an easy win for Seiko. Legibility, I would also give an edge to Seiko. Now we're talking about with the lights on and the lights off slightly, but more with the lights on, just how easy is it to read the time. I would give the edge to Seiko just because the gold tone, as weird as it is with the green, might not scream contrast, but it does work well and it is easier to read with the reflective nature of the markers. The Cyclops also helps in that area for the date. Not going to mistake the day of the month easily with the Cyclops. On the flip side, the milky brown of the Hamilton is more aesthetic choice and doesn't create much of a dramatic effect in separating from the black surface. Also, with everything being printed and sitting on a uniform plane of verticality, it does not have the same level of separation as the Seiko in that regard as well. Then for water resistance, this is another easy win for Seiko. 200 meters, screw down crown, arguably one of the most compelling aspects of this watch is its water resistance. Is it overkill? Absolutely. But is it appreciated? You bet. This water resistance surpasses some dive watches, and the ISO 6425 standard calls on only 100 meters to be classified as an ISO dive watch. The Hamilton Murph, on the other hand, is going to have really stellar water resistance, some of the highest water resistance for a khaki field model with 100 meters, which is more than enough for the day-to-day, but it is going up against a watch that is going to be leading in this class for 200 meters of water resistance. Also not going to be a screw-down crown for the Murph. I don't think you need a screw-down crown if the quoted water resistance is at that measurement. It just gives a bit more peace of mind, but there are some drawbacks to a screw-down crown as well that I don't think enough people talk about, but that's for another day and another video. In general here, we're gonna be given the edge to Seiko for the category of water resistance. So now we look at movements, and this is going to be more of a complicated conversation to have because there's some similarities with these movements, but I do think there's an easy winner here. This is gonna be Hamilton. Let's look at these movements more generally and talk about why I think Hamilton wins out. So the Seiko 6R35 has a 70-hour power reserve, operates at 3 Hertz, 21,600 vibrations per hour, has Spron alloys, so proprietary alloys for the brand, Edicron regulator, so you have that ability to adjust these movements. And then you have an accuracy range quoted by Seiko of -15 to +25 seconds per day. Then on the other side, we have the Hamilton H10, or also known as the ETA C07.611. 80 hours of power reserve, still operating at 3 Hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour. Also has a proprietary alloy for the swatch group with Nivicron. Both of these are going to be steady alloys offering some magnetic and shock protection. In this case though, we're getting more of a free sprung balance architecture, so we're not having the same regulating organ that we saw on the Seiko, so a little bit harder to regulate at home, but way more accurate out of the factory on average. As somebody has handled hundreds of versions of these watches over the years, Hamiltons in general, the Murph in general compared to the Alpinist, I find are going to be more accurate out of the box by comparison. And one other thing that I'll mention when looking at the movements here is going to be the finishing on the calibers. Now, they are not going to be world beaters by any means, but I would say the Hamilton edges out the Seiko. It's just a more attractive looking movement with some minor finishes to the rotor as well as what you're seeing on the bridges. The next category is heritage, and I'm speaking specifically to the watches heritage, not as much the brand level heritage, because I think that gets more involved in the conversation, really talking about the genre of watch that we're looking at. So I think you could argue for both of these watches. There is tons of history for both of these brands. Now, Seiko's Field and Explorer watch history is well established with the Seiko Laurel Alpinist models. You had the Alpinist line throughout the 2000s, the Seiko 5 Field models, and of course the later generation that we saw with the SPB121. That said, I think Hamilton is just too much to match in this arena, and you could argue no brand has as much credibility and history when it comes to field watches than Hamilton. And that's talking about it regardless of price. Hamilton produced military timekeepers for World War I and World War II for the Allied forces, and was a primary supplier of field watches to the US Army during the Vietnam War, with the references of the period very much inspiring much of the modern khaki collection. Even in more recent history, the khaki line is what Hamilton is predominantly known for, along with its Intramatics and Ventura. While the Murph utilizes a variety of design DNA of military-styled watches, its direct connection to a major box office film's plot certainly gives it some points too. So here, Hamilton wins out in the heritage department. Then we look at case and dial. So what I'm talking about here are what are those details, and this is not going to be as definitive, I would say, as some other categories, but what are the finer details that are going the extra mile and where are they apparent compared to the other watch? So I think I'm going to give a slight edge, just a slight edge to Hamilton, as the embellishments and the details are slightly better. The case lines are cut more precisely for the Hamilton Murph compared to that of the Alpinist. The signed crown on the Hamilton versus the unsigned crown on the Seiko is a detail most won't care for, although it is a point of going a little further nevertheless. The dial, despite being printed on the Hamilton, still is well done, and the cathedral hands have more detail when you look at them under close inspection. And although not a point of finish, the tolerances and sensitivity for the Hamilton are more precise than that of the Seiko when you're adjusting the time. So for here, I'm going to give a slight edge to Hamilton. And then for price, this one's pretty self-explanatory. Seiko gets an easy win here. It retails for $725, while the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph at 38mm retails for $895, with the 42mm option retailing for $995. So if you're following along at home, we can do the tallying up of the points. That comes in with the Murph getting 6 points and the Seiko getting a total of 5 points. So this is a very close matchup, and I think it's very hard to say that the Hamilton is always going to be better than the Seiko. This is too close, and it's basically a coin toss. These are some of the best watches that you're going to find under $1,000. I don't think you can go wrong with either, but I do want to share just some reasoning why and who would these watches best be suited for. What I basically say and what I think doesn't necessarily matter in terms of your own personal collecting journey. So buy what you want. That is the most important thing. Collect what you want. That's all that matters. But if I had to give reason to why somebody might own one or the other, in the case of the Hamilton, this is the watch that I would recommend for somebody that wants more versatility, but also loves the connection to film. The big thing here is the 100 meters of water resistance and a watch that can be dressed up easier than that of the Alpinist. But versatility and more of this traditional look, conventional look, is why the Murph might be the choice to go for here, while getting a stellar movement of 80 hours of power reserve in the process. On the flip side though, why would somebody go for the Alpinist? This is the total different thought process where you have one more thinking with your head and the other one really thinking about maybe emotion. You have this very distinct yet still somewhat practical watch. The Alpinist, if it wasn't going against the Murph, I would say is a very versatile watch. It's just going up against one of the most versatile watches I think you can get for under $1,000. Utility though, at the extremes, the Alpinist absolutely wins. So if you're trying to push your watch to the extremes, go for the Alpinist. 200 meters of water resistance, superb lume. You have the compass bezel. Will you actually use it if you ever get lost in the woods? Probably not. Don't get lost in the woods, folks. And also you have better legibility with a slightly larger case that is unconventional, but again, it can work in a variety of situations, and it does have this lovable trait about it. Sometimes it's very quirky, it's weird, but I can't help but love this watch. The SPB121 is such a cool piece. So that is just how I would think about making this buying decision. I think this was a good head-to-head. If you guys enjoyed this, please let me know in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Is there another set of watches that you would like us to have go head-to-head? Leave some comments down below as well about that. Definitely check out teddybaldisher.com. We are an authorized dealer of both Seiko and Hamilton, so if you are interested in these watches, you can check them out on teddybaldisher.com. Teddybaldisher.com is a full authorized dealer of over 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. In addition, how we're able to fund all of our productions here is through selling watches, so if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business. Allow us to keep doing what we're doing here. We love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.